Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, for another super special bonus live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, recorded on site here at the ASU campus in Phoenix, Arizona. They are hosting us here with their space. This event, DisruptED, put on by Collegiate Education. Excited for another conversation here, focusing in on something that I've always been kind of curious about, these sort of like kind of networks and partnerships and things that really drive some really great innovations and outcomes for institutions, employers, students, all that good stuff. So we have two really cool, distinct examples that we'll explore, but then just going to speak more higher level about these partnerships, why they matter, and just sort of advice and sort of reflections on that. So we will start, though, brief introductions from each of you, just about yourself and your roles. And then we'll also get into just each of you kind of explaining your distinct programs, and then we'll get on to the rest of the conversation.
Sure. I'm Marc Austin. I'm the Vice Provost and Managing Director for Montclair Unbound, a strategic initiative of our university to remove barriers to higher education and fundamentally transform what we do as an educational institution using technology. Part of that, though, is partnership. How do we leverage our capabilities in partnership with employers to produce outcomes that matter to our students?
Hi, and I'm Reamer Bushardt. I'm a Provost, Vice President for Academic Affairs, and Chief Academic Officer for the MGH Institute of Health Professions, which is a sort of an odd name for a university, graduate college that's owned by Mass General Brigham, which is a large Boston-based academic health center. We have 12 hospitals and about 85,000 employees, and we focus on the training of individuals for healthcare and translational science careers. So I've spent my career at comprehensive R1 universities, but this is the first time I've been inside a hospital system. So it's a pretty fun and exciting and very different place to work in higher ed.
Yeah, and I think, we'll stick with you, I guess, to just really a little bit more about your program. But I know that is like an area of certainly just, having a partnership like this, sort of a workforce development kind of initiative, on healthcare, like that's a huge area of sort of like, need of qualified professionals and everything. So, as much, I guess, as you can share kind of the history of it, just context of its, how it currently operates, and, just any kind of context on that particular initiative.
Sure. So Mass General Brigham was actually recently known as partners for many years. So the idea of partnerships is sort of under, is its foundation. So we have two academic medical centers, the Massachusetts General Hospital, where I work, and the Brigham and Women's Hospital. Those are the primary drivers of science and discovery work. The system has about $2.7 billion in funded research. So it's just a mega place for discovery. And then we have all the kinds of other things, a health plan. We have community hospitals, specialty hospitals, practices. And the idea is that, and we're also the oldest of the Harvard-affiliated faculty. So Harvard University, as well as MIT, work very closely with our health system. Our faculty hold appointments across those institutions. But the institute where I am is really about creating the workforce for that system. It's a hungry system in terms of needs for talent, so I can never produce enough. But our goal is to try to engineer programs and pathways so that we make exceptional practice-ready graduates in the rehabilitation fields and administration fields, large data, big data, science. And that's sort of a really clear mission. We also have big system needs where we need to transform our current professionals, our employees, and their families. And we work with hundreds of educational partners. So the Institute also provides like a interlocutor or a facilitator role with other higher education institutions around the region. And that's really, I love the thought of innovation because I always think about it as, you have these pieces and parts and how can you bring that together in, the most effective way and the cost-effective way and create access. And so I really get to do that all the time. And then we immediately can see the results of that because we also can see into the workforce who took jobs, how long did they stay, how are they performing, are their careers progression. So there's this sort of continuous loop of insight. So pretty awesome.
Yeah. So that's a great work there. And I think, because it's interesting, like the kind of partnerships on multiple levels, that idea of like upskilling your current staff and then like, working with like Harvard and MIT and everything, having those sort of like, partnerships over a period of time and everything. So that's great. Yeah. Montclair Unbound.
Montclair Unbound. So that is a dream state, what you just described, which is having that level of trust and relationship with the employer. So I guess I'm going to take you back to pre-Montclair. My background is in management consulting before I came to academia. And so my first role at George Mason University before I got to Montclair was building those relationships. Our first task was, how do we bring Amazon to Virginia, right? The HQ2 was underway and we were competing for it. And that's really where we sat down and brokered a relationship. And that's really what it takes. That's designed to foster mutual benefit. And so for Amazon, it was, how do I quickly upskill? And then for us, it's like, well, how do we quickly pay for those students that are about to get upskilled into new degree areas? So we worked very closely with them. We built the first cloud computing bachelors in partnership. The exercise there was, how do we line up the skills they're looking for with the educational environment that we're creating? It works best when you can build it together from scratch. The bigger challenge is once you already have an educational institution like we do at Montclair, how do you begin to foster those relationships to get to the level that you're describing, which is deep insight on the other side of the HR wall? And so the model that we're thinking about that's known to everyone is the InStride model or the Guild Education model. If you're familiar with those, essentially, they're connecting many institutions, educational institutions, to employers, but they really have a deep insight into what the HR needs are. That's the model that we need to build toward right now. As a new initiative, we're building the initial relationships. So we just created a deal with one of our largest employers that will allow us to provide degrees inside of their organization, which gives us a chance to learn and build that connection that you're describing.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. I guess, at different phases or sort of scales and on both sides here. But I think, it's interesting where there's maybe historically been only like lagging indicators of maybe some Bureau of Labor Statistics, like kind of just figures and all that are informative. But the idea of now, there's, I guess, a need or a benefit or just opportunities to be way more insightful around the particular roles that are needed in particular, organizations, and that there can be kind of a, cross collaboration of like, these employers working with the institution to inform what they're teaching, and then, these institutions to be able to, just be deeply kind of connected and, setting up their students for, maybe even just like, experiential learning opportunities while they're studying, or, gainful employment after they graduate. Because I think, the idea of, again, historically, I think there was like sort of a fog of war, or, like you might oversaturate certain areas with particular roles just because it's like, there was just not maybe the close interwoven kind of relationships and stuff. But I think now is just proving out that is, really beneficial, again, like for both sides. Like there's a lot of, I think now, clear kind of case studies or, models to follow, or just even more, I think, like it kind of, we've had some conversations, here around just like the accountability piece. Like I think that's just sort of in the air for higher education. And so I think it kind of comes into that, like sort of this cultural moment that's sort of like begetting this.
There really are two challenges, I think. I'm interested in your perspective on this too, like of building those relationships. Let's say you've opened an agreement and a partner understands who you are, you understand who they are. You have to get to the employee to explain to them the benefits of education. That's what we do from a recruitment perspective. Problem number one, awareness within the organization. Problem number two is once they're in, how do you keep them on track? Mm-hmm. And that's the second thing that we should be good at as institutions, which is student success. In this case, it's for the employee. What that does in the end is it produces what I call a dual engagement, right? So on the one side of it, you're making sure that you're retaining your employee, because if they leave, they lose that educational benefit. And on our side, we make sure that they're graduating, because if they leave, they lose the sponsorship for that degree. So that's what we're aiming toward, but it does revolve around those two big problems of how do you make them aware and how do you manage the student journey.
Well, even, I'll kick it back to you, but like, that's the idea of even where it's like, oh, we have great programs. We have all this stuff. We've got amazing like tuition benefits, but it's like, nobody knows about it. And you're not really doing anything to really kind of like contour around knowing that like, oh, this is like a working adult learner and whatever. Like, that is sort of foreign, certainly to some institutions. They've not really historically engaged those. So it's that idea of like, just because you have built it, they will not come, that sort of thing. So I appreciate that acknowledgement, but yeah.
It's a very small world because I served on Amazon's Health Force initiative when I lived in Arlington. But let me speak a little bit to being a part of the large employer. Most large employers I've worked with in my career are really terrible at long-term forecasting and planning for workforce. They have an immediate need or they have a crisis-related need like we did in COVID, and the educational system is just not engineered to crank things out and to build up that fast. We just, even the most nimble of us are really not able to do it. So I think the accountability thing worries me a little bit only because it puts a lot of responsibility in institutions. And if we don't work with the employer sector, it's going to be really impossible. But I think we're learning how to do that better at Marshall Brigham. So our system has put the people and the patients and the families that we serve kind of at the center of our matrix. And as we work and redesign our care delivery and our health plan and, all those other pieces, everything has to be sort of taken through that lens of how does the person sort of at the core. We've tried to do that also with our workforce initiatives, because if we design care around, the safest, highest quality, most research-informed way to deliver care, we're probably going to be designing education in a way that does well. And we do. If I could give my faculty over the years like a superpower, it would be practice analysis. And that sounds weird, but one of the things that we can do now is I can go into Mass General Hospital or I can go into our hospital on Martha's Vineyard or on Nantucket, and I can go in and I can study and analyze the very best care team we have. I'll say to the chief nurse or who's delivering the best care, who's got the lowest, the best safety rates. And so then we can back design and then we can use that to build our educational programs. And I think the thing that I have to keep reminding our hospital is education is more than training. You do a lot of training, but education is shaping a professional. It's helping them, embed ethics and values with care and skill. And so there are things that we need to do and say to employers, you're cutting it too short. You got to go more. So I think it's that constant flow between. But unless we plan together and kind of forecast, I find it very hard, and that like you're always just in a crisis experience.
It's so difficult to work with companies, partly because they don't do that planning. And so you don't necessarily know where their heads are. Best illustration I can think of is working with multiple employers at the same time. We're talking Lockheed Martin, Capital One, Under Armour, some big employers in the region. And they all told us what they want. Here's the list. Here's the skill set. We baked it into our curriculum, right? The ATS, the applicant tracking systems in these large corporations, didn't know what we were doing. And so it couldn't recognize these students. So unfortunately, it's a sad story because we built in alignment with an employer, but their systems didn't recognize it, or their strategies change and their demand for that particular credential changes. That's where higher ed, has to keep up with the speed of work, and that's a very fast pace.
I love to tell my higher ed colleagues, if you see companies or organizations in your sector merging or going through a big organizational change, get in their face. No, get in their face. Get in there. It's a great opportunity for higher ed. I'll give you one quick example. So we're shifting all of our cardiothoracic surgery, vascular, and cardiology programs into one heart and vascular institute, which will exist across all of the hospitals. So that means that if you need X care for this heart condition, you don't have to navigate and find where to go. The system is organized to help you do that in the most convenient, safest, best way. So as that Heart and Vascular Institute and all those people were coming together and rethinking how they were going to deliver care and get patients into the hospital and support a program, education was placed in that, and we designed it with them from the beginning. And we did things differently than we would have because of that. And now we have opportunities and new programs and structures that are built into that plan. I don't know. It's amazing, but you gotta be at the table. It's not an afterthought.
And early.
Early. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are already like rocking and rolling, answering the questions kind of organically that I wanted to ask, because I think it's an idea of like the things that are overlooked, like what makes an effective partnership. And, what I'm hearing is sort of a continuous cycle of kind of speaking that idea that you want to have those conversations early and often in terms of like informing, what are you looking for, employer that we have a partnership with, and, how is that changing? And then even that idea of like, informing about like, oh, we would like for you to teach more about this. We're seeing, this is what's, emblematic of a really great care team, or we're seeing a lot of, early graduates struggle with this. Maybe we're not spending enough time on it. We do cover it, but not enough, or not in the right way. But then even that idea of like, I'm sure you could even keep kind of feedback loops going of like student feedback of like them saying that they want more experiential learning opportunities, or networking or mentoring, or, any of those kind of things, and just keep adapting it to make sure that they, the students again, and like that idea of like those North Stars to like always ground the conversations, like what's going to be best for the student, what's going to be best for the patients, and what do we need to do to get there. I think it is just that idea of like making sure that on the student side they feel comfortable and confident going into that entry level job through that partnership, that like that is sort of the end of one chapter, but the beginning of the next. Of like, we did all of this to get here, of like getting these people into these jobs to give you what you need, and like we need for that to work out. And even those instances where it's like kind of a little bit out of sync, like, that's, a good call to action to be like, okay, yeah, we clearly, overlooked that, but, all those things matter. Like it's time well spent to just keep those conversations consistent versus it being like, well, no, we signed on the dotted line. We're partners now, right? Like we did,
right. Partnerships are hard.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not easy. And if you look at sort of corporate partnerships and corporate alliances, 70% of those fail. And why do they fail? It's because there was a misalignment. We thought we agreed. We reached an agreement, but then something changed. Our priorities changed. Our funding changed. Our other partnerships changed. So best practice is to keep a pulse on where your partner is. Regular check-ins are great. If you're working closely with them in co-design situations, that's awesome. But really, it's just regularly asking, are we still aligned? Did we actually meet the terms of our initial agreement? That works in all kinds of partnerships, not just corporate, but community colleges and others. But really important.
I think for me, it's making sure that we share the same values. I just find it really impossible to sustain a long-term partnership of values. You can see things differently. You can have different priorities or sort of areas of focus. But if you don't share some core mission, purpose, value, I think it's very hard. So I think on that level, the other thing I've done a lot more in the last 10 years of my career, having learned from the prior 10, is to build with the end in mind. So really to take the work, never put all of your eggs in a basket of a few executives that can sign a contract. You need deep engagement across the organization. And then what does success look like? What does it look like from a process point of view? What does it look like financially? What does it look like on the health of your community? Or what does it look like for social mobility? I mean, and I think, and then measure toward that so that everybody's being carried along. We're not making that progress. Let's adjust. Or, hey, we're doing fantastic. So I think really starting with what that picture of success in a very explicit way is helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I think even that like values alignment thing would be like, you would hope that it would come up early if it's like, oh, you company are really just looking to like cost cut on your like HR recruiting stuff. It's like, oh, well, you just will give us students. You'll just, just give us employees. We don't even have to worry about anything, or like, we don't have to do training anymore. Like, we'll just like cut all this stuff, and they just have like dollar signs in their eyes. And it might be like, if that's like your top priority or whatever, like that might be a little like, values misalignment. And maybe you can like negotiate that, but like even, that idea of like all those things you mentioned are the like great aspirations where it's like, if we're doing that right, like every stakeholder should be happy, like the institution, the company, and then just like, the community, like everybody wins in that scenario versus it being like, this like race to the bottom of like, cost cutting and whatever else. And even
it's okay to have a short-term cost cutting, but that can't be the only goal.
Yeah. Again, if it's like they could care less about anything else, it's just like, how much money are we saving? Like, what if it's like, oh man, like the fact that like you really don't care at all about any of the other stuff of like, but like that is the idea of like, that can be part of, like kind of the trade-offs or something where it's just like, yeah, we can't really, train or educate, early employees the same way that obviously you can with your, subject matter experts and just all the tools and resources and, that sort of thing. But, and I think that's what I'll kind of start to kind of bring us in for a landing. I think like all of this to be said, these partnerships, they're complex, it's hard work, and, doing it long term. Like, I think just making sure to put extra emphasis on like, how does all this benefit the student? Like the idea of like you forge this and you do it right and all that. how ultimately does it help the student to get, a better experience, a better education? Like, what are the sort of the aspects that are kind of emblematic to each of you, I guess, of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to those shared objectives, right? So the student has to also, whenever they take a course, right, we have learning objectives. What are the things that you're going to get? So from the student perspective, I always worry about experience. What are the translatable experiences that they're going to get in the partnership that is our students working with an employer? On the other side of it, let's say it's an employee coming to our university, what kind of progression are you going to make? What are the requirements that you need in your organization to succeed? Those are very different objectives, but understanding what those are and documenting them, writing them down is hugely important.
Yeah. Well, and I think my immediate reflection on that is that like sometimes there's like misguided professional development things, and especially I guess it's just, it depends, I guess, on level setting expectations, but the idea of sometimes where it's like, oh, we're giving you these opportunities to learn, but really it's just like helping you to do your one job at this company better versus the idea of like, if we're paying for you to go to a university with this partnership, whatever, it's like, obviously we'd love for you to stay here and build your career, whatever. It's like, but it really should be helpful to you wherever you go, whatever you do, and, all that kind of thing. So that just is something else that comes to mind is like, you don't want it to be so laser focused where it's just like, oh, all we're doing is just making entry-level Lockheed Martin employees. It's like, no, it's if somebody is interested in that industry, they theoretically could get a job anywhere, but it is the idea of like, we have forged this partnership and they're deeply intertwined and you are going to be very well positioned to get a job at that place. But like, if life happens and it just doesn't work out that way, like it is still valuable time spent for you as a student to get that education that is informed by this employer that's doing the work every day and whatever else. So I think like that comes to mind on sort of an existential level of like, how does all this benefit the student is like those sort of things.
I can give you one lived example because we think about that a lot too. So right now, our organization is working with support from the Bloomberg Foundation as a part of 10 or 12 sites around the country to rethink sort of the secondary education to workforce. So to be quick, we're working and have sort of worked to transform a public charter high school in Boston, which currently has 400 students. We'll soon have 8 when the new building's ready. And it is a fully healthcare-focused high school. So they're earning their high school credentials, but at the same time, their curricula is enriched with healthcare content. They're doing paid internships in our hospital. We're tracking them into career clusters, providing mentorship and support. The whole idea is that institutions of higher education are supposed to illuminate. We're also a business. We need to make this work and sustainable. So we will be able to recruit and develop and train this phenomenal cohort of young people who hopefully most, if not all of them, will spend their career with us. But they'll have entry-level certifications when they walk out of the door for high school. They'll have guaranteed opportunities in 4-year and 2-year colleges to keep going. And each pathway that they're in has 4 to 5 different steps where over the course of the career they can keep advancing. And so I think, there's lots of different ways for them to swim through that. But we know it's a progressive career ladder that meets a societal need and a workforce need. And we've had now 4 years for them to get to know us and get to know them. I mean, to me, this is like the best of what we can do. There's not a downside to me to that type of partnership.
Well, and the idea that, like you said, even if it's like, oh, I love, this particular industry that's kind of interwoven into my high school, whatever, the idea that even then you have the optionality of like, well, yeah, I'd like to maybe just immediately go to work at a high school, or it's like, actually, I'm actually interested in like furthering my education. Like I love this and I want to work there, but I'd rather be, a registered nurse or whatever, or like really pursue further education. Because I think that's the idea of, on the flip side of like how this wouldn't really be beneficial to a student is if, in some way the agreement forced you to do certain things. It's like if you're signing up for this as a student enrolled in this, partner program, you have to do this and you have to do that, or else, whatever.
There's a risk that it becomes too transactional. Right. I mean, that is what we're talking about, and that's not the purpose of education. It's designed to expand and allow you to explore. There are differences between the graduate partnership, if you will, and the undergraduate experiences. They do have different objectives, but at the end of the day, it's about making sure there is that sort of interest in exploration and development. And that's kind of what these are really about, not transactions.
I really don't like the word pipeline because it suggests you're moving people.
There you go, widgets.
We use pathways because you create opportunity and then you allow people to adapt within the market. To me, it's great. And of course, education is still, I think, the most powerful driver of social mobility we have on the planet. So let's lean in.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're catching you here before your session here at the DisruptED Summit here. So we'll wrap up here. Question we're asking everybody, just quick final bit of advice for leaders that are navigating this moment in higher ed.
Well, I think it comes down to trust. And I think the point of shared values leads to a deeper and more trusting relationship. It's hard. It's hard work to get into a partnership. So if you don't have trust, it's not worth doing.
Healthcare's dealt with disruptive times, with regulatory financial pressure for a long time. So this doesn't feel very different to me. But I would say if I've learned anything, it's that really clarity of mission is a very stabilizing force during turbulent times. So that's my advice. Stay really focused on what you're trying to do and what your aspirations are, and they'll get you through.
Yeah, like don't have that just be something like left on a shelf and not, brought up ever again. It's like, every day, often, top of mind for folks as they're making decisions. So we will leave it there. Thank you both so much for sharing all that you did, for being a part of the summit. And again, thank you to Collegius and ASU for hosting us here. And just a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.